Did you ever wonder why your eyes water during the winter? What about runny noses? Our Drew Anderson set out to answer these questions. Here's what he found.
I love the cold, but it does not love me. Take a look.
Yeah, and it's making me cry. Do you see some tears coming down? The cold weather, that's what it does to me.
And that always happens to me in the cold. My eyes start tearing, my nose starts running. So let's go find out why. We're here at Jefferson Health. Dr. Sommer, why do I cry about something I love?
Drew, that's a really interesting question. And I guess the easiest way to think about it is it's a protective response. See, the eye only has two ways to protect itself. It's either by blinking or making tears. So whether it's a finger in the eye, a bug, a piece of dirt, wind, or cold weather, you blink and you make tears.
Well, what about my nose? Because you put me outside in the cold and I got this as a faucet.
Well, the nose actually runs for several reasons, and one is actually because you make tears. So not only do tears run down our cheeks when we cry, but it also runs through little ducts called tear ducts, goes right into the nose. This is why when you're cutting an onion or you're seeing a sad movie, not only do you cry, but your nose runs.
And what about the blood vessels in your nose? Because don't they help too?
Yeah, so the principal function of the nose is actually to warm, filter, and humidify the air we breathe. And so in the process of warming, little blood vessels in the nose dilate and actually help to warm the air.
Cold air is super dry. That's why we get cracked skin and all that sort of stuff. But why does that matter to have moist air coming into your lungs?
So just like the skin, the lung is exposed to the outside continuously. So we need to keep it moist just like we need to keep our skin moist. So the lung does not like dry air.
I gotta tell you a quick story since you're a lung expert. Man, I was hauling down to the train station in the cold, like running as fast as I could because that train was leaving in like 3 minutes and it was more of a 10-minute walk. I made it, but boy, I was coughing and my lungs felt agitated probably for an hour afterward.
And this is because exactly what you talked about, that the lung loves warm and moist air, but winter air is cold and dry, so that can be very irritating. And that can elicit things like coughing, shortness of breath, and even bronchospasm, what we refer to as cold-induced asthma. And we treat it almost exactly like standard allergic type asthma.
How does that work? Because it kind of did feel like I had a little bit of asthma going on. I had that as a kid, so I got a little bit of a vibe of how that feels.
Well, the same thing happens in the airway as a protective response. The nerve endings get activated and then try to shut off the airway in order to protect you from this winter, cold, dry air.
Let me show you a demo because I think I have a cool way to show what happens, at least with some of your airways, of when the cold kind of causes things to contract. Let me show you this. All right, so this will play the role of our airway going down to our lungs. But I gotta warm it up, right? Because how warm is this in your body?
Probably around 98 degrees.
Glad I got some hot water for that. I was making some tea earlier. Here's the leftovers. And now, let me cap this off. And I'll tell you what, throw it in the freezer because that'll mimic me running to the train station on that really cold day. And what does that do to our bodies, right? It constricts the airways a little bit if I'm just breathing in that air and it's not warming up?
Yeah, exactly. So the airways do constrict a little bit, and that's why in some people who are more susceptible to this really feel it and get short of breath.
Let's see it. Let's see how that airway's doing. Look at that. It's contracted. Now, it's not that dramatic in our airways, right?
Let's hope not.
Dr. Sommer, thanks so much. And before you know it, it will be summer, and we won't have to worry about how cold air affects our bodies. That right there, what do you think it is? Well, it turns out that measures the weather, temperature, humidity. This is measuring air quality, and that's on about a dozen cars heading around Philly on this Saturday. Let's find out why that's happening. Let's hop in. And we're on this route for a reason. This area really holds on to heat. Hey guys, how come?
There's no trees, which means that there's no shade, and you're experiencing that exposed asphalt, which is black. So those two things in combination, you do not have heat relief, and you're experiencing that heat for a very long time.
Makes sense why this part of North Philly is one of the hottest areas of the city.
We're gonna make a left onto Front Street, so we're gonna take it all the way to Front.
I'm loving the ride right here in the back seat. But Ivana, why did you want to come on the ride today for the study?
We wanted to prove what we already know, being in our neighborhoods, which is that it's very hot. And this is something that we experience all the time, but we need the numbers to help us show that.
And that's it for the first trip. Now, they're heading out 2 more times today. I'm going to head out and talk to the organizer of this study to find out what they're hoping to learn.
What we hope to learn with the Academy of Natural Sciences and all our community scientists that went out this morning is a better idea of how hot it is in our neighborhoods. Heat is on everybody's mind. We've had recent heat waves, and it is getting hotter in our city. So this will help us to think about how we can prepare for that heat in the future.
And I'm ready for some more AC. From West Philly, I'm Drew Anderson on Fox 29.
All right, thank you, Drew.
You got it.
That was interesting.
It's, you know, it really surprised me how much warmer it is without having any shade of trees. It makes a huge difference, and they're going to learn more from that from the studies happening today. And there's one more coming up here in about half an hour.
With this heat, you're keeping tabs on some energy-saving tips this time of year we need to know about.
Oh, yeah. We have a full article waiting for you at fox29.com, and it's so timely because our electricity prices are at their absolute highest they've been in years, just looking back. So some of these tips are pretty simple, but you just don't think about them. One that's actually a great tip is to run appliances that produce heat, like this right here, the dishwasher, or your dryer at night. So that makes a big difference. Some other things, actually as simple as just closing the blinds, just like that. According to Pico, it turns out about 40% of unwanted heat comes right through the windows. Some other tips waiting for you on this article. Using a ceiling fan makes a big difference because it's a lot easier to move air than to cool air. And switching out any old school light bulbs with LEDs because LEDs produce a lot less heat. And that is a look at the tips. We have much more in a full interview waiting for you in that article at fox29.com. We'll be back.
And will give us a better understanding of what's actually out there in outer space. So, of course, we had to check in with our station scientist, meteorologist Drew Anderson. So what will we get to see, Drew?
This is super cool. We're going to see a planet that's outside of our solar system. You know, when I went to school in the 90s, there was what? Only 9 planets? Now we've discovered 4,000. We'll also get to see these two things, nebulas and galaxies, which we got to see in the sneak preview image that NASA released just a few days ago. Nebulas, that's these big gas and dust areas where stars form, and that's one of the main objectives of this telescope, just to help us better understand how do stars form. And then there's massive clusters of stars called galaxies, like ours, the Milky Way galaxy. This right here is around the State College region. I got to see that this weekend. It kind of actually looked milky. You get to see it more where there's not any light like here in Yellowstone. And that's what this picture is showing. And we're going to see more things like this from that right there. And that's actually real gold on the telescope. It gets that light from these outreaching planets and stars, and it focuses it into the center. And what else is neat about this telescope is when that light enters into that telescope after passing through the air of another planet, we can actually tell what air is on that planet.
Heat has become more extreme in the past decades, and it's lasting longer. There's a lot of research being done in Philadelphia and across the country to help residents live more comfortably in those hot zones. Here's Drew Anderson.
We're doing a tailgate here in Hunting Park, and in honor of the park right down the road, I got a ball, and it just so happens to be the Earth. The 10 hottest years on record have pretty much been in the last decade, since 2010, globally speaking. But what about right here in Philadelphia? Well, it's been hot too. It turns out 3 of the 5 warmest summers ever have been pretty recent. Look at those numbers right there. Last year was the 3rd warmest year on record, but now let's talk about that summer sizzle, those 90s. So on average, now we get 30 days in the 90s. That's up. See, every 10 years, the National Weather Service updates our average weather to take accounts of how our climate changes. So when they updated things just recently, we went from 24 days on average in the 90s each year to 30. Last summer, we had 37 days in the 90s. And where I'm at right now, well, let me tell you this, it's one of the hottest places in Philly. Let's find out why. Ivana, this has got to be one of the hottest spots in the city.
It really is. Hunting Park is one of the hottest neighborhoods in the city, along with Strawberry Mansion, Point Breeze, and Cobbs Creek.
So why in particular is this area so hot? Is there a certain reason?
Yes, there is. It's actually called the urban heat island effect. And what that is a concentration of certain conditions that cause excessive heat. That includes things like black asphalt, black top roofs, and even the lack of shade and green spaces that trees would often give us.
Hey, you know, that's a great point. Come to think of it, you know, the pavement is pretty warm. And I brought a temperature gun right here. And we'll do a little measuring. So looking at that, where the light is 130 degrees plus, compared to the shade where it's in the 80s. So clearly there's a reason for the shade, and I understand you and your organization are part to thank.
Esperanza put in these shade structures that we like to call the Bench Planter Project. And what it does is it helps people have a space to sit, get to know their neighbors a little better, have a little shade, and enjoy some greening space in the backrest with some plants.
And clearly, temperature-wise, it makes a huge difference. And I understand that there's a particular reason why neighborhoods like this are particularly hot, isn't there?
Absolutely. It's a history of disinvestment, things like redlining and bringing certain people into certain areas where they just don't experience the same access to resources and opportunities as everyone else. And so there's a lack of trees here, mostly because there's no space for the trees. And even if there are, they're not the right trees for the right space, unfortunately.
You're going to be going out later this month to better understand temperatures around the area. And for that, I want to bring in Richard Richards from the Academy of Natural Sciences of Drexel University. Tell me a little bit more about what's going on across the city, because you need your car for the groups that are going out, right?
At the end of the month, we're going to be working with groups like Ivana's and going around and actually mapping not only Hunting Park, but the entire city of Philadelphia, mapping the heat and the air quality in the city. But there's going to be about 50 people who are going to be scientists with us with the Academy of Natural Sciences. We're going to equip them with sensors that mount directly on their cars, and they'll go and map the entire city. You know, in Philly, it's not the heat, it's the humidity. So
yes,
our sensors are going to capture that air temperature and the humidity that is that experienced heat that people feel when they're walking around. We're going to send them out at 6 a.m., 3 p.m., and 7 p.m. And so we'll be able to see not only how hot it is during those 3 different times, but how heat changes in the course of a day in a city like Philly.
Speaking of heat, do you want to use your fancy temperature gun and show me? Once you get a picture of that, point that on me, and I want to show the heat. And if you want to take a look at how I'm going to look right there, because you can see the heat on me, this is looking at temperature, and there it is. I'm saying goodbye from Hunting Park in Philadelphia. I'm Drew Anderson.